His name is Michael Jordan, and back in the day, he was a pretty good basketball player. Michael Jordan has, for many years, done an event in Las Vegas in which he's invited 100 old guys, right? It's doctors, lawyers, people from the technology industry, 100 guys. The only thing we have in common is that we love to play basketball. Now, I love basketball so much. I live in Tallahassee, Florida. I have a full court at my house. Guys play there often. It's a great way for us old guys to get our energy out. Jordan, 100 guys, brings us there to Vegas, divides us up into teams of 10, and then he brings in 20 of the greatest coaches in the history of the game. We're talking about Mike Krzyzewski at Duke, right? Roy Williams from North Carolina, John Thompson from Georgetown, Jim Boeheim from Syracuse. 20 coaches, 19 are in the Hall of Fame already today, and over the course of 4 days, their job is to coach us. It's a pretty lousy deal for the coaches. The first 2 days, though, you get up and you play basketball all day long. It's awesome. And the truth is, you sit in the bar all night long, and you tell each other how great you used to be. And I don't know what it is, but the older you are, the greater you used to be, right? That's for sure. But then on day 3, you're laying on the floor, you're trying to figure, do I have a full day's worth of basketball still left in these muscles, when Michael Jordan walks out, and he says, today we're going to start with something a little different. You see, today I'm going to give 20 of you the opportunity to go one-on-one with the greatest player of all time. How about being able to tap yourself on the chest, call yourself the greatest of all time, and have no one in the room argue with you? How awesome would that be, right? Jordan walks through, picks 20 of us out, tells us to stand in a line. I happen to be one of the 20. As we're standing there, shaking in our Nikes, which is exactly the way Michael wanted it, Jordan said, the rules today are very simple. In fact, they're so simple, I'm going to let my assistant explain them to you. Jordan's assistant steps up and she says, yes, the rules today are very simple. You see, today you're going to play a game to 1. First guy to score wins. And Michael Jordan starts with the ball. Your job, she said, is to guard Michael. She even put it in quotes. Quite patronizing, don't you think? Your job is to guard Michael. Somehow Michael doesn't score, you get the ball, Michael Jordan guards you, first guy to score wins. Jordan steps back up, says, while you're thinking about this, I want you to know that in the 9 years I've done this little competition, 5 guys have ever scored on me. And today, there won't be a 6th. As if he needs the help. Now, Michael Jordan's in your head too, right? Well, the guy 2 in front of me, he went out to guard Michael Jordan, right? He went out to throw his elbow in Jordan's chest, but he couldn't get that high. As you'll see there, though, he's locked down on Jordan's hip, right? He's got him right there. And then Michael made that move for which he was so famous in the NBA. It's called a ball swipe. You take the ball, you use the momentum of the ball to knock your defender's arm away. When your defender separates, you take off to the basket. Michael Jordan, ball swipe. Our defender, he separated from Michael. When he did, he actually stepped on his own toe. He fell straight back to the ground. 1 dribble, 2 steps, thunderous dunk. Michael Jordan pulls the ball out of the net. And as he walks by our fallen colleague, Michael chucked the ball on him. And he said, now you know what it's like to be spanked like a bad child. Michael Jordan loves to talk trash. The greatest trash talker I've ever been around the world of sports. I love to talk trash too. It's an art form for Michael Jordan. I mean, I promise you, if Nike was not his major sponsor, Waste Management would be, right? This guy's that good with trash. Well, 2 guys later came yours truly. And as I walked out there thinking through my enormously limited options, I decided that the only thing I didn't want to have happen that day was I didn't want Michael Jordan to dunk on me, right? I didn't want him to dunk on me. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to step back. I'm going to stay between Jordan and the basket no matter what he does. Actually, Duke's coach, Mike Krzyzewski, came up later and he said, Yaeger, you were so far away from him, if you'd wanted to go out and guard him, you'd have had to take a cab. As you'll see in this picture, Jordan's got the ball in his left hand, and with his right hand, he's calling me out. Michael Jordan looks at me and he says, are you really going to give me this shot? And I looked back at the greatest player in history and I said, I don't think you have it in you. 100 old guys started laughing, like, who's dumb enough to say something like that to Michael Jordan, right? Jordan shook his head, goes up, takes his shot, and misses. Ball goes wide left, and clearly I had a head start to the ball, right? I actually got the rebound, and I took it back outside the three-point line, and Michael Jordan was stepping out to guard me. As Jordan was stepping out, I looked back and I said, Michael, aren't you going to return the favor? as if I'd done him a favor by being a lousy defender, right? Michael Jordan looked back at me and he said, I know you don't have that shot in you. As Jordan stepped up, I stepped back, and from 26 feet, became only the sixth player to ever score on Michael Jordan this event. As I said, I'll be telling that story till they close my casket. And even on that day, I'll be trying to pry that sucker back open, make sure everybody in the room knows, right? One moment, one shot. Michael Jordan was the second best player on the planet. So you might be asking yourself, gosh, here we are. We had like loads of information heaped upon us today. We've got so much to consume and think about. Why would they let this guy step up on that stage, and why would he open with that story? First reason is because I can. Right? If you scored on Michael Jordan, wouldn't you open everything you do for the rest of your life with that? Right? The second reason really is why Bill and the Oracle team asked me to come spend a little time with you today. As he chronicled, I have been blessed over the course of the last 25 years to have worked with some of the greatest champions of our lifetime, some of the greatest winners of our generation. And over the course of that time period, I did carve out a little piece of every interview I've done to ask them about greatness, because I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by what allows some people to go from good to great and stay there. Why can some people be continuously high performing? And over the course of that time, I did keep a series of notebooks just on the answers that those great winners gave me to those questions, to that question. And several years ago, as Bill mentioned, I did sit down and I wrote a book kind of chronicling out the answers that the greatest winners of all time give to that question. The number one answer, the one that comes up most frequently when the greatest winners of our generation talk about this subject, is that at some stage in their life, the truly greats learned to hate losing more than they love winning. The truly great ones expect to be successful at everything they do. Failure leaves a mark. Now, I don't know how good the resolution is for some of you back there in the back of the room, but if you could take a look at this picture and ignore the goofy white guy on the right-hand side, he had just scored on Michael Jordan. If you can get a glimpse of Jordan's face, you might have a sense of what Michael had to say to me in that moment and over the next 2 days. Michael had a lot to say. Very little of it I can repeat in this room. He was aggressive. He was occasionally foul. He kept coming back to this idea of a rematch. To which I said, dude, you had your shot. Michael Jordan giving it to me, right? This event's 4 days long. He actually does it every year. It's a charity event. He actually does it for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I'm honored to serve on the national board of Make-A-Wish, and I love that his passion and mine intersect there. But over the course of these 4 days, Jordan raises $1.5 million for Make-A-Wish. It's extraordinary. At the end of the event, he hosts a reception at a ballroom, much like this, chandeliers. All the players are there. You got your spouse, your significant with you. All the coaches are there. Jordan's got his team with him. And if you're one of the players, you come to that last reception with a couple of goals in mind. First, you want to make your way into Jordan's company to thank him for the invitation. Just the opportunity to be there is pretty cool. And then you want to hope you get invited back. My wife and I are there. We're making our way around the room, and we end up about 25 feet from Jordan. He sees me for the first time, and he starts. And he doesn't care that my wife is there with me, right? It is not particularly nice, right? We're walking toward him. I'm thinking, why does Michael Jordan care, right? I mean, it's a charity event. I mean, outside of the tens of thousands of people I'm going to tell, who's even going to know it happened, right? But we're walking toward him, and I said, Mike, I realized I wanted to ask him that question. As we're walking toward him, I realized I get to call him MJ, which is what you get to call him after you've used him like a dish rag. We make our way up, and I said, Michael, seriously, I got it a couple days ago. That's funny. It's not as funny anymore. Why do you, explain. What's going on? I promise you the next 30 minutes among the greatest time you'll ever spend inside the mind of a champion. Understanding how great ones think different than most. Michael Jordan said, you know what, I don't do anything in my life to finish second. He said, it doesn't matter if it's the 7th game of the NBA Finals or a moment with a scrub like you. Thanks, Michael. He said, I do it all to finish first because I believe that if you get to a spot in your life where you're okay with second, where you have an excuse for second, you've got someone to blame for second, you'll spend your lifetime there. And I didn't want to be that guy. Michael, where does that come from? You're one of the most competitive minds I've ever been around. Tell me, where does that come from? And Jordan said, you know what? I'll tell you exactly when it started for me. He starts telling a story. It's not a story that I knew anything about. I certainly didn't know what he was offering that day. He said he was a sophomore in high school, Wilmington, North Carolina. That year, Michael Jordan stood 5'11". He was trying out for the varsity basketball team at his school. There was another sophomore trying out who was 6'7". At the end of tryouts, the coach realized he had room for one sophomore, decided to keep the 6'7" kid, and he cut Michael Jordan. Michael said he goes home that night. He's crying because he was convinced he was the better player when his mother did what a good mother does, right? She wraps her arms around him. She tries to console him. She offers him an excuse. She said, Michael, one day you'll get it. The other guy was 6'7". Don't let this bother you. And Michael Jordan said this was his moment. This is when he realized what his mind shift was going to have to be in order for him to be great. He said he looked his mother in the eye at 15 and said, Mom, we could spend the rest of our life coming up with an excuse for finishing second. I won't do that. He said he got up the next morning at 4 a.m. to go outside and start shooting baskets because he wanted one day to make that coach regret having made that decision. Jordan actually shared later, some of you might know that a few years ago they inducted him into the Hall of Fame. When they did, they gave him 300 tickets, told him to invite anybody he wanted, former teammates, family members, friends. Michael Jordan said, you know what, I had no problem giving away the first 299 seats, but I held out one till I could track down the 6'7" kid that beat me out for the team as a sophomore. And actually, during his speech at the Hall of Fame, he actually asked the cameras to find him, because Michael Jordan wanted to say thank you. He said, you know what, you became the first log on my fire. I learned then that I could make an excuse or I could learn to hate it, and learning to hate it changed who I became. He said, if you want to learn this lesson, if you want to teach it to that next, we're raising an entire generation of people today who are being taught that losing's okay. They've got somebody to blame every time something doesn't happen their way. He said, if you want to change that, we want to break that cycle, you take excuses off the table. If you can do that, you will learn how to hate losing more than you love winning, Jordan said. You know, he actually had a line there that was so impactful. I still have it written. It hangs in my office. And he said, you know what? A loss is not a failure until you make an excuse. What a powerful lesson in the way the great ones think. How they think different than most. What a powerful discussion point it was with one of the greats of all time on the habits of individual high performance. As Bill said, I actually did write a book several years ago about the individual habits of high performance, and it was a great experience to get into this discussion, and it's led to the opportunity to do keynotes at many companies throughout the world. But 4 threads really kind of tie those habits of high performance together. The first is that the truly great ones, they believe that the greatness is available to all of us, right? Most of them will tell you that greatness is available because they did common things uncommonly well. That's what allowed them to separate themselves from others. They made one more call than the guy next to them, right? They believed that it was those common things that separated them from others. The second is that many of them will tell you that what allowed them to be the very best had nothing to do with their ability to touch their toes. It wasn't about physical gift. It was about mental, emotional, spiritual disciplines that they were able to weave into their lives, and in doing that, they were able to change the dynamic of what they could achieve by building discipline into who they are. And that's encouraging, because I can't jump like many of them, but I can work on discipline. I can work on disciplining myself. The third is they talk about the importance of proper nutrition. That's the idea that it's not physical nutrition, it's what they feed themselves every morning. And almost to a person, every one of these amazing champions shared with me, they block out some piece of their day to feed themselves something. What they read, what they listen to, who they talk to, what they watch. They are giving themselves something that they believe feeds into their nutritional needs to be great. Really powerful discussion. And finally, almost every one of these amazing champions, and this is where this intersection of these 2 projects came together. This is the new book that comes out here, as Bill said, in about 3 weeks. That almost every one of these amazing champions wants to be part of a great team. Individual high performance is awesome, but what they really want is to actually be part of something bigger than themselves, and that means they need to align themselves with the very best. You know, this discussion of great teams actually began several years ago when one of the companies I was doing some work for asked me that question. You know what, we love the discussion about how individuals perform better, push themselves, but why can some teams do what others don't? If you believe, as I do, that success leaves clues, I then made it my mission that everywhere I went, when I was on the road, I was carving out time to try to learn from the very best of all time, learn from the best team builders of all time. That journey took me from Duke down the road to North Carolina, where the women's soccer team there has won 21 national championships, and their coach is one of the most amazing leaders of all time. It took me to San Antonio actually, I realized that not all teams are given the same resources, right? Many of them have, but still, some great teams can evolve from the smallest of resources. So I sat down with a two-person team of Misty May Traynor and Carrie Walsh Jennings, two women who have dominated their sport for more than a decade, and yet in doing so, one of them actually tore her Achilles in Dancing with the Stars. The other one actually gave birth to two children. So it wasn't their physical gift that allowed them as a team to dominate the world. It was their knowledge of each other. It was the camaraderie that they built. And it was so interesting because the very lessons that they taught me were being shared by Nick Saban at Alabama, or by the study continued on with Tom Osborne and went up to Tom Izzo at Michigan State. I even ended up a couple of years ago with Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks. His team had just won the Super Bowl. They had dominated the Denver Broncos. Some of you might remember that domination, and they did so with a very young roster. Everybody believed they were the future of the NFL. They were a roster that was set to dominate their sport. I asked Coach Carroll, so what do? You've just won it all. How do you keep your team in line? How do you keep them fired up and ready and energetic, ready to go? He said, I'll tell you exactly the first thing I did. The second I got into my office and I could settle down, I reached out and I made a phone call across the country to Bill Belichick, the head coach of the New England Patriots. See, earlier in the decade, the Patriots had won 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. I wanted to know, how did he hold that team together? How did he get them continually enthused? I'm sure someone in that conversation, Bill Belichick said, Coach Carroll, one piece of advice is that if you ever get down to 2nd and goal to win the Super Bowl, throw the ball. Throw the ball. Actually, what Bill Belichick did say is, Coach Carroll, let me give you one. I'll tell you what, this is an awesome phone call. Thank you so much for making it, because you know what? The second we won our first championship, I made a phone call. I called Jimmy Johnson down in Dallas. He had won several Super Bowls earlier. I want to know, how did he do it? How do you hold a team together? It's one of the greatest challenges of a successful organization is repeatability, right? But in all those discussions, and about 120 of these great team builders have sat down with me over this last 5 years, a secret continued to come up, a formula that I will tell you was a driver in every one of their success. And that it wasn't about individual plays, it wasn't about some fantastic talent, because talent comes and talent goes, right? The truly great will tell you that the formula for winning starts at culture. They have created the right culture. They are clear about what they stand for. Right? They're clear about what will be valued in their organization and what will not. And if you create the right culture in your organization, behaviors follow. And once those behaviors take hold, habits become a part of your team. And the greatest teams, they will tell you, come because habits have led them to success. Almost every one of these organizations shared with me that culture happens by design or default. The great ones are not letting it happen by accident. Right? But when I think of the greatest team I ever had a chance to work with, look at, study, a team that had it all, right? It would be this team here. Officially, they were called the 1992 USA Men's National Basketball Team Barcelona Olympics. We all know them as the Dream Team. 3 years earlier, the International Olympic Committee had changed its rules, allowing every team in the world to bring its best talent to the games. It did not matter if they were amateurs or professionals. We were committed, from the USA basketball standpoint, of sending our very best. Our players were so great that most of them didn't require a second name. Right? The world knew them as Larry, Michael, Magic, Charles. That team wasn't just a collection of individual talents, though. It had everything you want in a great team, right? You want to talk about the habits of a great team. They had leadership on the court and off. They had amazing depth, so much so that they could, if somebody was injured or there was a loss of a player, they were ready to move right on, right? They had ridiculous camaraderie. And by that doesn't mean they liked each other. In fact, there was an unbelievable amount of friction on that team, which is real in almost any high-performing organization. But the camaraderie was built on the idea that they respected each other. They appreciated each other. They knew why each of them were there. And that actually leads to what many of those players I've had a chance to talk to about this experience being on that team. And they will tell you the number one reason why they were so extraordinary is that this team understood its purpose. They understood their why. See, USA Basketball had kind of fallen off the international scene, and they were committed to telling the world, if you let us send our very best, no one's even close. Well, that team, their opponents actually became their fans. That's how great they were, right? I love this picture. This is the Lithuanian national basketball team. After they had just been beaten by 51, they rushed to our sidelines so that they could take a 1992 version of a selfie, right? They wanted a picture to prove to their family that they were in fact on the same court with our players, right? But this wasn't just some lousy Lithuanian team. This was actually the third best team in the world. They won the bronze in those Olympics. The USA team was just 51 points better. My favorite picture from those games, though, this tells you when you've reached a great team. This is actually one of the Lithuanian players. He had come to the game with a camera snuck in his sock. And during the game, he pulled the camera out, he slid down the sideline so he could take pictures of his buddies and our players on the same court. See, that's when you know you've built a great team, when your opponents are on the sidelines taking pictures of you, right? Well, that team did what everybody expected. They went through the eight games required to win the gold medal, and they won by an average of 43 points. No team in the history of that sport has ever dominated an Olympic Games quite like that. So what happens? All of you who are in sales, when you meet your quota. What happens when you reach the expectation that everybody expects of you? They expect more the next year, right? Or they expect you to at least achieve what came from the previous years. And in the next two Olympics, our team did go on to win a gold again.